Did you used to play D&D when you were a kid? I mean, like real D&D? Dice on the table, modules, pencil and paper character sheets, with a bowl full of Doritos on a Saturday afternoon? That kind of D&D? Are you now old and antisocial like me, but you still want to play that old school vibe that you had when you were a kid? And this is the game for you, my friend. The Secret of Weepstone. This game is sent as a love letter to the original Dungeons & Dragons, and specifically the tactile environment of tabletop role-playing games. This comes closer to the 1980s session than any other video game I've ever played, right down to the dice rolls, the modules, and old-school Dungeon Master narrations. Check out even how the game begins.
Nestled in the shadow of its imposing, now abandoned keep, sits the dwindling riverside village of Weepstone. But things were not always so. For in times gone by, a man from the east, known only as Ra, grew to power, waging a relentless campaign westward. After crossing the mountains into the kingdom of Talesworth, he established his seat of power and constructed a stronghold from which to oversee his lands. He called this stronghold Weepstone Keep.
And it's all delivered in this glorious black and white sketched art style. It's kind of reminiscent of those old school monster manuals and player handbooks that were a necessity back in the day when nothing was digital. You know, after the game begins with the classic Dungeon Master intro, gives some background to Weepstone Keep, its history. Just like back in the day, it kind of invests you in the story before a single dice is even rolled. First NPC you find is fully voiced, and it'll lead you more into this backstory and then give you an opportunity to pick out your party. You get a choice of 6 slots. There's a lot more on the screen, but a lot of it was locked behind the demo. But each one's got its own little backstory, and you know, you got your classic, you know, rogues and fighters and thieves, but then you get this glorious old school D&D manual. Look at that. That's if you've played it, you know, and it sucks you right in, and this is how the game starts. That's really cool. I really enjoyed how it brought you in. It's about as old school as you can get. It doesn't take long to fall into that old beat of walking down dank corridors, exploring strange and dangerous locations, finding loot, interacting with the character sheets. It all just hints of such nostalgia, especially for someone who did this with the old school pen and paper on a tabletop on a Saturday afternoon. As you can see, that character sheets and everything just smacks of like that old school play. But then you get the cool point and click stuff like this, little puzzles you got to solve. I didn't get super far in the game, so the puzzles were pretty easy in the beginning, but it was just kind of showing you a tutorial. You know, you don't get ultimate freedom, but you get choices, different choices that could affect the game. And this one particular logic puzzle, I had to find that scepter, put it in his hand, pull it down, open it up, and it'll lead you to a nice health potion there for me. I did put that in my inventory. So then, even how it tracks your way through the game, it uses that old school mapping from like a module. And again, it just, the reminiscent factor of anybody who did this when they were a kid, it's just gonna make you smile so many times while you play this game. Because again, this is just a love letter to, you know, that 70s and 80s era Dungeons and Dragons. You know, so we'll check out some more gameplay here as it goes back into the dungeon. So you have the freedom to walk around and walk down the corridors. You know, obviously, just like an old school dungeon, you're going to get a bunch of different places you can explore. A familiar game loop of finding loot, solving puzzles, avoiding traps, doing combat. It should feel pretty familiar to anybody who's played the old school D&D, new school D&D, or, you know, any of the many video games that have aped the formula and refined it for modern audiences. But you run into combat. We're going to hit some goblins coming up right here after I loot the spear because it's a better weapon.
The sound of small boots disturbs the quiet of the room as small figures burst forth from the haphazard barricade. They brandish crude weapons and seem particularly intent on defending their hideout.
From From there, it should feel fairly familiar to anybody who's rolled some dice across the table. You start for rolling initiative. I win the initiative. Then you pick a party member, pick a target, roll to see if you hit. I got a hit. Roll to see the damage. Got 5 damage, +1 for strength, enough to take out the goblin. You know, you systematically go through. I'm sure they tilted this for me so I'd win the demo, you know, and win the fight. But I will be victorious. Take out the goblin. One last attack. And got a hit for 4 damage, and that was enough to defeat the goblin. Victory has been achieved. But we went onward, and then we found this. Oh yeah.
A foul odor pervades this place. A smell so heinous it is beyond description. A sitting board runs the length of the far wall with 3 openings. Despite the buzzing flies, you hear the faintest sound of rushing water that seems to be coming from the farthest hole.
Again, apologize for that poor audio on the game capture. I don't know what happened, but anyway. So yeah, this was an interesting part to show off what kind of poor decision making one can have. So this is the latrine area, and I walked up to the latrine, and then I hit something here, and it'll give me a description of the latrine.
Peering into the opening shows a drop that leads out of sight and into absolute darkness, farther than any sane person would attempt to climb, unless, of course, they wished for certain death. You hear the sound of rushing water coming from below.
Well, of course we crawl into the toilet. So that's exactly what I did. And we learned our first lesson in the game the hard way. Into blackness he went.
The party calls down in desperation, but they receive no reply.
They received no reply from the latrine. Thus was the demise of Egbert, the first party death I got. So it shows off how just, you know, your characters will come and go fairly easily with poor decision making. But so the more point and click things, you know, this game rides a pretty good middle ground between Dungeons and Dragons and a point and click adventure. You know, all the familiar elements of both seem abundant. A lot of puzzle solving. There's like a key mold area I had to solve, get a key mold and some instructions, and that I couldn't read, but then it actually translated them for me. But this just kind of shows off some of the, you know, more simple puzzle solving things you'll have to do. So key mold goes there. Now we have to figure out how to get the molten stuff in. So there's some steel ingots. Again, none of this is rocket science, but you know, it's a little bit of figuring stuff out. Some of this has multiple steps. I'm hoping as the game would go on and get more deeper into the dungeons, the puzzles would become much more complex. You know, come over here and we'll pump the air into the fire and melt the steel to get the key to open the door. So again, kind of the same things you might have done back in the day, but you know, I don't remember doing multi-step puzzles like this necessarily in Dungeons and Dragons. So this is a good example of how they'll take a video game concept and kind of meld it in here, you know, to flesh out the experience, you know, and so you actually have an added depth of puzzle solving mechanics stolen from other video game ideas, and that just adds more depth to this whole approach. So then I got my key, so it took a few steps, but key goes in the inventory, and I will be able to open some door that we needed to open, perhaps that door. Here's another combat scenario, big giant cockroach thing. Again, we'll be rolling dice and for initiatives, and I believe I win this one, combat. We'll go for some initiative. We win the initiative. Again, I think the demo is being kind to me. We go through a bunch of stuff. We win that fight. And this is towards the end of where I stopped playing the demo, but It's kind of cool. We walk out into this courtyard. Again, the graphics continually kept making me go, whoa, that's pretty cool, wow. And, it's pretty impressive for the sketched art style we're looking at. Then some kobolds attacked me from above. It's so paced the way an old school D&D session would be. It doesn't need a lot of rhyme nor reason. You're just in a dungeon and there's monsters there and there's loot there and we need to take them out. So we'll let this play in the background as I kind of wrap this up. It's a really clever game. It really hits its mark for what it's trying to do, which is essentially capture that OG Saturday afternoon, sitting around a table with your friends, rolling dice, Dungeons and Dragons experience. It finds a nice middle ground of adding some new ideas from video games to round it out, melded with a point-and-click adventure. It's great. It's absolutely great. I don't know if it'll appeal to people who don't have a familiarity with the source material it's pulling from. Maybe the storytelling and just the unique delivery of the black and white sketch stuff might be charming enough to keep people in. But for someone who grew up playing D&D, this was cool. It was just fucking cool, and I enjoyed every second of it, and I'm most definitely going to buy the game when it comes out. I hope they release it in series like modules, and maybe it would be super cool if you could keep characters and bring them from module to game or something, and have higher level modules. I don't know how far they'll take the D&D theme, but in this opening gambit, it works really, really well, and I wish the game a lot of luck. So Secret of Weepstone, if it looks interesting, there'll be a link down in the description. Please support the game, give them your attention, give them your money, at least even try the demo. It's worth your time. So, 2 thumbs up. Secret of Weepstone, worth your time and money.